Whoa, wait. This is the second set in my Insight 5K run with Jeskai Mutate. If you haven't watched the first set yet, I'm not going to redo the deck description in every single video, so I'd recommend you go back and watch that one first. The link to that is in the description. Alright, now let's go. So this is set 2 against Cycling. We're against Jeskai Cycling, and we are currently 1-0 beating Mono Green in round 1. This matchup's a little weird. The decks are built a lot of different ways, and they can take a lot of different approaches to the matchup. They can either run out all their aggressive 1-1s and or 1 health minions and try and get under us, or they can play the control game with us with melees and Ironcrag Pyromancers and Zenith Flares. Nothing really interesting happened up until he runs out the Pyromancer. Pyromancer on its own isn't awful. It does mean we can't run out Rodan though, because he's just going to shoot it down. So that's not really an option. That being said, 2 Ironclad Pyromancers are really, really bad, because now, A, he has a really fast clock on us, and B, our win condition gets shot out of the air by 2 Ironclad Pyromancers. We're going to try and dig for some answers here, because we need to deal with one of these somehow to be able to stick the gold span and win the game. We want to keep those 2 lands so we can actually get to our gold span, so we are going to discard the Maid's Mind Tome here. We could just use the treasure, but I'd rather hold that up and mutate Rodan onto it. After spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to get out of the situation, because I could cast gold span here, I decide to Expressive Iteration. Even if I cast the gold span, I'm only going to have it for a turn, it's going to immediately die. I do have a second gold span, but I'll be stuck at 5 mana because I'm going to use the treasure token. I mean, I generate another one. So, one way I could get out of this is by going gold span, and hoping he can't answer it. But I decided Iteration. And I'm going to cycle the Seize the Spoils to try and find an answer to one of these Pyromancers. We discard the land there. I find that after this deck became more of a control combo deck and less of a straight combo deck, it's really easy to flood. So generally discarding the land while seeming risky usually ends up working out for you, because your chances of flooding are a lot higher than, well, getting mana screwed, but both can happen. So here I try to go for the gold span. One big mistake I made was not playing a second red source. I am going to get hard punished by the Disdainful Stroke. Unfortunately, this with the combined effect of the Pyromancers basically putting me on the 2-turn clock and being able to kill my out basically just strictly means the end of the game. To make things even better, he memory leaks the other gold span. So yeah, we are very dead at this point. So, as I mentioned before, when sideboarding for this matchup, I don't really like sideboarding in the Red Cat melees unless my opponent is keeping the Ironcrag Pyromancers, because I find a lot of the time you end up spending your cards trying to kill their snowbally 1-drops, and then Red Cat melee ends up not being a great card. We are going to add the Dispute. A, he brings in Counter Magic, and B, just throwing a Dispute at Zenith Flare ends up being a very impactful way to use it. Cinderclasms are also going to come in here. I find, generally with my experience with this matchup up to this point, a lot of people really try to lean on Improbable Alliance post-board. So running Enchantment Hate and Improbable Alliance Hate, so like 1/1 Hate, tends to be a pretty effective strategy. I end up cutting the Sea Dasher Octopus for those aforementioned Cinderclasms, and I decide on a Rip Apart for the last slot to try and hit Improbable Alliance and creatures. Essence Scatter is notably pretty awful here because all the things he wants to play are relatively low. do I end up keeping it in? I think it would have been smarter to switch that out for Red Cat melee there, but that's post thought. So game 2 against Cycling. Hand looks very good. We have ways to find more cards, we have interaction, we have combo pieces. This is, it's hard to find a matchup where you wouldn't want to keep this hand. Even in the matchups where Dispute isn't very good, this is still a very good hand. We do draw a second gold span. I mean, at this point in the game, we would like to see another land, but it's really not that big of a deal. There's our land that we needed. Notably here, we could iteration. He will likely counter it, though, if we choose to go for it. Ever since iterations, ever since people have found out that it's the busted card that it is, people have been really interested in it, in making sure it doesn't fire off. Our opponent just cycles a bit. Noticeably, he cycles the Flourishing Fox. I remember at the time I was playing this thinking that was super weird. Like, why wouldn't you run out your Flourishing Fox on 2? Because especially, like, I don't really have a great way to deal with it either. But it seems like our opponent, and he immediately goes to Memory Leak and essentially just gets a Dispute here. But our opponent plays really, really scared of our stuff. And then we in turn end up playing really scared of their Zenith Flare. So this ends up not playing out as a typical Cycling game would play out. I find most of the time the opponent's trying to ramp out their threats and you're killing them and they're trying to be the aggressor, but our opponent here played very patiently. And a lot of our sideboard cards end up being very dead as a result. So after a lot of time has passed, our opponent cycles a Memory Leak and misses a land drop, I believe, which is really, really telling. It basically says our opponent's in trouble. So at this point, we want to get into a position where he can go. The fact that they held up 2 mana also is pretty signifying that they're A, afraid of us comboing off, and B, they have interaction for our combo, or for parts of our combo. After some deliberation, I believe I discard, get rid of the gold span. It's kind of sketchy. I don't really, honestly, the only card I really want to get rid of here is Prismari Command. If I get rid of the land and then immediately draw a land, that's also not great. Or, yeah, if I don't get rid of the land and immediately draw a land, that's also not great. And unfortunately I do. So the land was the correct discard there, but I decided to keep it in the case of, I do need the 2 lands here in order to interact with his interaction. So he does have the stroke. We're going to negate it. And at this point, we know he's stuck on 3 lands, so we want protection for our gold span, because if he gets rid of that, we're way behind because we have no cards. But mutating both of these Dracuses allows us to catch up in terms of card advantage and keep our gold span on the board. So we get our negate for protection, and then we get card advantage. So our opponent did find their land. We're going to iteration here. Try and find more cards. Hopefully find a Rodan or a Vadrock and just end the game. That will definitely end the game here. And our opponent goes to try and shoot our gold span down. That's why we wanted that protection. I think I eventually decide to dispute this for a couple of reasons. If my opponent has that Red Cat melee, dispute will miss it. It won't work once they untap. So I'd rather throw a dispute at this, kind of anticipating a Red Cat melee on his upkeep. Our opponent then decides to try and negate our iteration. We need that iteration to continue getting ahead, so we are 100% going to throw the negate at the iteration here. Or sorry, the negate at his negate. We want that iteration to resolve. And we do find our Vadrock. Once they see the Vadrock, they concede. No change in sideboard. Notably, I didn't see any Ironclad Pyromancer, so I didn't add any Red Cat melees in, but I do think I should have once again swapped that Essence Scatter for a Red Cat melee after the fact. So this hand looks pretty good. We're perfectly happy to keep it. Our opponent does mull down to 6. We have Cinderclasm and Fire Prophecy for interaction. I mean, if our opponent decides not to play anything out, they do end up being dead cards. But we still have to consider the aggressive curve. Like, if he goes Flourishing Fox on 1 and we don't have an answer to it, it will kill us very quickly. We don't want to play the iteration here because we want the value off the 3rd card. Generally, if you only have 2 mana, the iteration card that you want exiled is going to be a land. And since we played a land this turn, generally your iteration here, you're really only just digging down 3 for 1 card, which isn't really how you're supposed to use it. I mean, there are niche scenarios, but once again, decide not to use the iteration. I want more mana to do stuff with, and there's a pretty good chance that once again he's going to try and shoot down the iteration. We finally decided to fire off the iteration after drawing a second one. Our opponent ponders a bit and does decide to interact with it. We predicted that. We let it go. I'd rather hold the dispute to either protect our win conditions or to stop a Zenith Flare that is going to kill us later in the game. Notably, over the past few turns, and this is pretty indicative when he cycles a Memory Leak here, his Zenith Flare is getting pretty big. So that kind of puts a psychological clock on us, like we don't want to get blown out by double Zenith Flare. So just like he's playing around us, just winning out of nowhere with Goldspan, we have to play around him, just double Zenith Flaring us and killing us. Go for a second iteration. I think from the looks of my hand right now, I would probably dispute this. He cycles Shredded Sails in response, which is interesting. That means he probably has a good amount of interaction in his hand for Goldspan. So it does go through, and we do find our Goldspan, as well as a Shelter and a land. I kind of want both Shelter and the Dragon, but I can't play the Shelter, or I can't have both. If I exile the Shelter, I can't play it. I actually decided to play a land from hand here. I really need the double red to play the Dragon. I kind of learned my lesson the hard way game 1. So we decided to let that Hengegate in exile fizzle. Ironically, we draw a Mountain. Seems to be poetic justice, but we ended up drawing into really bizarre options. Now, normally I would have been okay just letting a red cap go. I mean, I can't counter the red cap, but I mean, this is really indicative of the way he wants to play this matchup. He really, really just wants to prevent our Goldspan from resolving, because if he had a bunch of Zenith Flares there, it was a very possible route that he could just hit me in the face for 9, cycle, and then hit me in the face for 10 or 11. But instead, our opponent is prioritizing keeping our win condition off the table. There's the melee. We cannot answer it. We can try and Fire Prophecy, and there's a pretty good chance that just to cycle a card away. And seeing from the way he's playing, I don't think the Fire Prophecy is gonna do much in this matchup, because he's really just not running creatures out. So we're gonna Fire Prophecy our own Goldspan and try and find an answer. Get rid of the land, we don't really need it. Keeping the Cinderclasm in case he has the Improbable Lines. We do draw another land. I'm happy to draw it now, but it doesn't save our Goldspan. Drawing another land, really not feeling great about that draw. Cycle it away, we don't need it. Find a Goldspan. Okay, this is something. Kind of back to where we started. We decide to play our land out. Our opponent cycles a Rock and Trim on the end of our turn. Notably here, our opponent finally presents their win condition, once again, of Ironclad Pyromancer. I think it's pretty safe to say, at least for this matchup, seeing as how he played out game 1, it may have been better for me to side in those red cat melees. I mean, I'm saying that after the fact, so seems kind of redundant, but at this point he has a clock, so I'm feeling kind of pressured. I feel like I kind of have to do something here. I probably didn't have to act this quickly, but the only reassurance would be if I maybe had some sort of protection. Fortunately, there is no interaction here from the opponent, so we're going to try and get as much value as we possibly can here. Maybe snowball into a win if possible. At this point, we just want value. There's a good chance that if he can remove our gold spam, we won't be able to stop it with a mystical dispute that he knows about. Unfortunately, our hit is pretty terrible. It doesn't really do much of anything here. We can haphazardly, I believe I haphazardly just try and string something together to kill the Iron Crag in fear that he'll run out a second one and lock down my win conditions like he did in game 1. Before making any rash decisions, though, I'm more interested in winning the game here if possible, because it does look like our opponent doesn't have anything that can stop us if we go off this turn. Otherwise, they probably would have thrown a wrench in our plans by now. I have decided to go about killing the Ironcrag Pyromancer. Alternatively, I could have Prismari Commanded again. Once again, try and find a mutate piece or an iteration or just something. But notably, our opponent Zenith Flares us here. It makes a lot of sense because, well, the Gold Span Dragon's going to win the game a lot quicker than the Zenith Flare will, and at least in a top deck scenario, because our opponent can cycle the cards away that he doesn't really need, he is in a better position than we are. Unfortunately, we're not really finding anything with our Prismari command. It looks like we're in a really bad flood here. Our opponent does present their win condition in the form of Pyromancer. I think it's safe to say at this point that if your opponent decides to take this really slow, controlling approach to the mutate matchup as a cycling player, it's pretty safe to keep your Red Cat melees in. I can say that my round 4, which wasn't recorded because I had internet problems and came into it with a game loss, did win the set, but that was also against cycling, and unlike our opponent here, they played out their Foxes and their Valiant Rescuers and on curve and all that, and it just didn't work out for them. We had answers left and right, and they were skipping out on trying to find their land 3 in order to keep that curve going. It was... I'm not sure if this is a better plan than the other way, particularly because this player does lose to the player who goes, or who went to top 8 with this deck in the Pro Tour, in the Strixhaven Pro Tour later on in this tournament. And I'm assuming they would have taken the same approach to their deck as they would have to mine. I'm not 100% sure, but make a lot of sense. Notably, Memory Leak here can exile a card in our graveyard. We used the Cinderplasm there just so he couldn't pick it out of our hand, but he does exile an iteration out of our graveyard, I believe. So that is really relevant. I mean, I think we have more than one in there, so it really doesn't matter that much to us. But so as you can see here, we draw a land. Fortunately, we can cycle away just to find another land. It's just not doing it. We need resources, and lands at this point aren't doing anything for us. Our opponent's just going to keep their clock going. We're more concerned about stopping us from doing things, and unfortunately he has a pretty easy job of doing it. Our deck is kind of doing it for him. And he gets a lot of card selection here, being able to get rid of the cards that aren't really doing much for him. Once again, our opponent engaging in some card selection, pushing their clock against us. We finally draw something other than a land. This is quite good, but we need mutate creatures with this in order to do anything. Because while a gold span, I mean, we could draw a Vadrock or a Lord Drakis, and then we have something going. But the Goldspan Dragon itself is not going to outpace the clock they have against us. They have us dead in 2 turns. Maybe 1. Like, well, I guess not 1, but like, they could cycle on, they could cycle right now, they could cycle on their turn, then cycle on mine, do 6 damage that way. But the Goldspan on its own is not going to do it. I decided not to block here, because my only chance of winning this game is drawing a Mutate and mutating on a Goldspan Dragon. I also could Iteration and find some stuff, but it's much more likely that I'll be able to win the game by mutating onto the Goldspan here. That will not do it. There's no way we can snowball into our combo here. The dragons aren't enough to pressure him having us dead on board. So that'll do it. That is set 2 in our Insight Esports run. We are currently 1-1, but like I said earlier, we do get quite deep into this tournament, so there's a lot more to come. Thanks for watching.